The following is a class on the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, third chapter, text number 42, given by His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, recorded on September 4th, 1994, in Bombay, India.
Haritam Paramarshibhi Sukadeva Gosvami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn delivered the Bhagavatam to the great Emperor Pariksit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges, awaiting death without taking food or drink. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. All transcendental messages are received properly in the chain of disciplic succession. This disciplic succession is called parampara. Unless, therefore, Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literatures are received through the parampara system, the reception of knowledge is not bona fide. Vyasadeva delivered the message to Sukadeva Gosvami, and from Sukadeva Goswami, Suta Goswami received the message. One should therefore receive the message of Bhagavatam from Suta Goswami or from his representative, and not from any irrelevant interpreter. Emperor Pariksit received the information of his death in time, and he at once left his kingdom and family and sat down on the bank of the Ganges to fast till death. All great sages, rishis, philosophers, mystics, etc., went there due to his imperial position. They offered many suggestions about his immediate duty, and at last it was settled that he would hear from Sukadeva Goswami about Lord Krishna. Thus the Bhagavatam was spoken to him. Sripad Shankaracharya, who preached Mayavad philosophy and stressed the impersonal feature of the Absolute, also recommended that one must take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, for there is no other hope of gain from debating. Indirectly, Sripad Shankaracharya admitted that what he had preached in the flowery grammatical interpretations of the Vedanta Sutra cannot help one at the time of death. At the critical hour of death, one must recite the name of Govinda. This is the recommendation of all great transcendentalists. Sukadeva Goswami had long ago stated the same truth, that at the end one must remember Narayan. That is the essence of all spiritual activities. In pursuance of this eternal truth, Srimad Bhagavatam was heard by Emperor Pariksit, and it was recited by the able Sukadeva Goswami, and both the speaker and the receiver of the messages of Bhagavatam were duly received by the same medium. To the great Emperor Pariksit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges, awaiting death without taking food or drink. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam Udha Mate. Shankaracharya taught us through his followers that at the time of death there is nothing that can save us. No endeavor or no religious principle, save and except to remember the holy name of Govinda. nahi nahi rakshati dukrin karane. Maharaj Pariksit, the king of the world, who was endowed with all powers, all wealth. He was still young and strong. He was cursed to die in 7 days by the bite of a snake bird, Taraka. The king took this as the blessing of the Lord. He accepted it as the sweet will of the Lord to give him the opportunity to detach himself from all other thoughts except the glorious pastimes and names of Sri Krishna. He performed his duty as long as Krishna required or Krishna requested him to do so. But at the right time, he was ready to give it all up. Within this society, we are given so many duties, so many responsibilities. As a brahmachari, we may be performing the puja, we may be out preaching in various places. As a grihastha, we may have our business, we may have our profession, our responsibilities to our families, or we may be a mother, or a housewife, or a teacher. There are so many varieties of responsibilities according to the Varnashram system, and each one is meant to be performed as a service to Krishna. Dharmasya hyapavaragyasya naratata yopakalpate naratasya. Krishna, Bhagavatam explains that we should not be attached to the facilities or the service itself, but we should be attached to Him who we are serving. So the real test of whether we are really performing our work for the satisfaction of Krishna and Guru is if we are asked to do something else. If we're asked to give it up. Are we attached to the person we're serving, or are we attached to the facilities that we are getting for our service, for our own personal interests? Once having something and being accustomed to utilizing it in our life, it is very difficult to live without it. If we do not have much, it's easy to live without much. But the more we have, the more we become conditioned to think that we need it. Just like that story of the sage who was sitting on the bank of the river. And in order to solve the problem of having to wear a loincloth that was wet, he gradually had to get married and raise a family and everything else. One thing leads to another in this material world. The more you have, the more you require to maintain and preserve what you have. The rat was eating his loincloth, so he got a cat to keep the rat away. And the cat was hungry for milk and disturbing his meditation, so he got a cow to milk, to serve the cat milk. And the cow, of course, someone had to feed it, and someone had to milk it. So he got a wife to take care of the cow, and then he found he had to take care of his wife. He had to get a job, and he had to get a home, and he had to buy her saris, and then she wanted children. And then he realized that one thing leads to another. Better I just sit with my wet loincloths and live peacefully. So that is true, that even in devotional service, we are given so many facilities to perform our service. What Bhagavatam explains, do not get attached to those facilities. You should be willing to do your service whether you have them or not. Srila Prabhupada, when he came to the West, he had no facilities. The only facility he had was his faith in the words of his Guru. But as the years went on, he was given all facilities, every possible facility. But for such a great Vaishnavacharya, whether he had everything or nothing really made no difference. He was simply going to serve Krishna and try to execute the order of his spiritual master. So we should know that Maya is trying to trap us at every step into bondage of material attachment, even in the name of devotional service. Srila Prabhupada used to tell us that if you are living in a palace and you are asked to serve Krishna under a tree, you should not be attached to your palace. And if you are living under a tree and you're asked to serve Krishna in a palace, you should not be attached to your tree. Some devotees, they're very much attracted to a very renounced life where they have nothing, where they just sit on a lonely riverbank chanting the holy names and remembering the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. But if it is Guru's instruction that we fly in jet airplanes and drive in cars and live in big cities and endure all the pollution and headaches of dealing with management, that is actually surrender. We should not be attached to our riverbank or our peace. That is an inferior form of devotional service. And at the same time, if we have big management posts and all sorts of facilities and nice offices, and we're asked to just go somewhere where there is no facility whatsoever, sit down and chant Hare Krishna, we should be willing to do so. We are attached to serving the order of Krishna, and we will accept whatever is favorable, but we must reject whatever is unfavorable. So Maharaj Pariksit, he was the king, and he had every facility. He had armies, he had beautiful, beautiful palace. Everything that the Pandavas and the Kurus fought so bitterly for was all given to him. You know how Duryodhana wanted that throne? Do you know what type of atrocities he did for the throne of Hastinapur? He was so greedy for that position that he was willing to attempt to kill his own brothers, cousin brothers. He fed Bhima poison. His own aunt, Kunti Devi, who actually loved him and cared for him as much as his own mother, Gandhari, And actually Yudhisthira had greater love for him and respect for him than his own brothers, his own 99 brothers. They were so gentle, so loving, so kind. He sent them to that house in Varnataka and had it arranged that it be lit on fire so that they would all be burned to death. But by Vidura's kindness they escaped. On another occasion, he cheated them in the gambling match with the help of Shakuni and sent them to the forest for so many long years in exile. And there he did everything within his power to humiliate them, to belittle them, to torture them. He went looking for them. He was praying that Rakshasas would kill them. He did everything he could for one purpose, because he wanted to sit on that throne. He wanted the position. He wanted the title of being the emperor. And all of the benefits that come along with such a position. And ultimately, when the Pandavas came back into their glory after the exile, it was arranged, give the Pandavas some place to rule, otherwise there will have to be a terrible fratricidal war. And Duryodhana was so fearful that if he gave them anything, that eventually they may take his position away from him. So he was willing to fight the war. He arranged 11 Akshohini divisions of soldiers. The Pandavas arranged for 7 Akshohini divisions of soldiers. During those days of the war of Kurukshetra, millions upon millions upon millions of soldiers were slain. Blood was flowing like rivers. Duryodhana lost all of his 99 brothers. But even after seeing that, he continued to fight, because he couldn't conceive of giving up the facility he had of being the king, of having that nice throne, of living in that palace and having power and glory. He fought for that throne until his bitter death. And here we have Maharaj Pariksit, who had all those facilities, everything, in toto, even in a superior position than Duryodhana, because Duryodhana was still under Dhritarashtra. He was simply to become the king. But Pariksit was full-fledged king of the whole world. And when Duryodhana was king, there was opposition against him. But for Pariksit Maharaj, he had subdued every corner of the earth. There was no opposition. Everyone accepted him, embraced him as their leader and their ruler. And when he was cursed to die by Shringi, the son of Samik Rishi, he accepted it as a blessing of the Lord. He was thinking that all of this throne, all of this family life, it is all so much disturbance that I've accepted as a service to the Lord. Because such great Vaishnavas as Yudhisthira, Arjuna, they ordered him to take the throne and the responsibility. And he accepted it, not because he wanted the position, not because he wanted the title, but because he wanted to serve his superiors. He accepted it. And he performed his work so thoroughly and so well. We read in Srimad Bhagavatam what type of a king he was. Although he was detached, his detachment did not in any way, shape, or form minimize his performance. Sometimes when we have a service and we're detached from the service and we're detached from the result, we just don't care. We just do it half-heartedly. That is not bhakti. Bhakti means you do it wholeheartedly with all your God-given energy. You do it right. But you're willing to give it up because you're only doing it to please Krishna. You're not doing it for the sake of being the proprietor of what you do or the enjoyer. So Pariksit Maharaj was such a king that he personally took his chariot and his horses with his armies, and he traveled to every part of the world to make absolutely sure that the religious principles that Krishna spoke in the Gita and that the rishis were protecting were being followed by all the citizens. And when he came upon the personification of Kali beating an innocent cow and bull, he was so outraged that he personally, with his own hand, drew his sword and was about to kill that rascal. Maharaj Pariksit was in the front lines, ready to defend the rights of every living being to become Krishna conscious and to be protected. Such a king. There is no such thing as any politician today. He was willing to risk his own life, not the lives of so many hundreds and thousands of millions of the youth of his nation. He was willing to risk his own life to be right there in the front lines to protect the innocent and establish religious principles. He ruled the kingdom so thoroughly and so perfectly. Why? Because it was the instruction of Yudhisthira Maharaj that you be the king and you do it right. And Yudhisthira Maharaj was a Vaishnava. And to serve the order of a Vaishnava was his only motivating force. Because Krishna speaks through the Vaishnavas. Samsiddhir haritoshanam. Whatever we do should simply be for one purpose, to please Krishna. But when he was cursed by this inexperienced son of a Brahmin, for no good reason at all, how did he respond? He could have retaliated. First of all, he had tremendous mystic powers himself. He could have done something to reverse that curse. Or he could have sent his armies to that little hermitage of Samik Rishi in the forest, and he could have forced him to withdraw the curse. He could have killed them all in revenge. But he accepted. No. I did my service as long as Krishna wanted me to do it, and although I'm still young and strong, it wasn't like he was an old man who was at the time of retirement and was asked to give up his duties and for a higher service and not willing to do it. Srila Prabhupada so much condemned the modern politicians who just stay in office even at old age because they just can't give up the power and control, the position and respect that comes with it. And they just cling to their powerful position until death. Maharaj Pariksit, he could have continued on for many long years, but he accepted. I serve the order of my superior Vaishnavas, and now Krishna is telling me that I've done my role, I should go on to another service. So he gladly and gratefully gave it all up. He gave up all of his wealth. He just put on a loincloth. He gave up his throne, his palace, his family, his armies, his facilities, his fame, his everything. He even gave up eating and drinking. He even gave up sleeping. And he went to the bank of the Ganges. This is the example of real detachment. Now, we as devotees, seeing the example of Maharaj Pariksit, we must question our own willingness to give up whatever we're doing, if it is the desire of Krishna. If we really want to come to that higher level of pure devotional service, are we willing to give up the particular service that we have now, if that is what is expected of us, and all the facilities and all of the distinction that comes with it? Of course, it is nothing but Maya to give up your service whimsically on the basis of your own mind. Such a mentality is condemned. You have no right. That was Arjuna's position. Arjuna wanted to become like Maharaj Pariksit at his last stage when he was on that battlefield of Kurukshetra. Arjuna was ready to wear a loincloth and sit in the Ganges and associate with sadhus. But Krishna told, no, this mentality is Maya. You must fight. You must be a great warrior on this battlefield. Because it was the will of Krishna that he fight, he was willing to endure every type of inconvenience, every type of crisis and tragedy. In the process of this fight, he demonstrated such surrender. Sometimes we think when we surrender to Krishna, everything should go just right. And if it doesn't, then we lose our faith. I'm doing this because Krishna has ordered me to do it, so why isn't everything going my way? Arjuna wanted to just end the war right there, before it started. If he left, the war would be stopped. Everything would be given back to Duryodhana, and there would be some artificial conception of peace. But on Krishna's order, he decided, I must fight. And he endured so many hundreds and thousands of arrows in his body during that war, and so many tragedies. His own beloved son, Abhimanyu, was ruthlessly murdered in that battle. And Arjuna's heart was broken to pieces because he loved his son. He was a Vaishnava. And Arjuna's poor wife, Subhadra, how she wept and cried at the loss of her beloved son. And what pain that caused Arjuna. Not only the loss of the son, but to see the grief of his beloved wife. We may think, if I'm doing this for you, Krishna, if I'm surrendering to you, why did this happen? You are the controller. But he did not question that, because he was a true devotee. He was willing to endure whatever came and continue on in his devotional service. He didn't quit. He didn't quit when things went wrong. He didn't quit when his son was killed. He continued on under all circumstances. And he fought. And ultimately, Arjuna and his brothers were made king. But he just did it for Krishna. He was willing to tolerate anything for Krishna, and he was willing to go on with his service for Krishna. And he was detached. But don't have a neophyte conception of detachment, that it means you don't care about your service, or it means you can just give it up in a second. Some devotees are foolish. They think this is some sort of an ego, due to their false egos, they think that this is some sort of a high position, where they're not getting the proper respect that they feel they deserve in their service, or they're not getting the proper facilities, or they have to undergo certain types of crises and tribulations. So they say, well, I'm detached. I don't care about this. I'll do something else. This is bogus. This is nonsense. This is Maya. This is not what Gita teaches. Krishna told Arjuna, you fight this war and you don't be attached to honor or dishonor, to happiness or distress, to pleasure or pain, to success or failure, victory, defeat, or birth and death. You fight for me, and you fight hard with all of your might. Give up your lethargy, Arjuna, and fight. This is Krishna consciousness. Sometimes devotees, especially brahmacharis, they have some argument, or they have some difficulty, or facilities are not right, or their service isn't going right. There's some conflict of some sort. I'm not attached to this ashram. I'm not attached to this service. I'll just go to Vrindavan or Mayapur and I'll just chant and be a real devotee. This is nonsense. This is absolutely contrary to the teachings of the Gita. This is not the way to get the mercy of Guru and Krishna. This is simply surrender to your mind in the name of Krishna consciousness. This is not detachment. This is attachment. This is gross attachment to our own mental conceptions of what is Krishna consciousness and what pleases Krishna. Pariprashnena sevya. We're supposed to have a guru because we're supposed to know nothing and inquire submissively and execute his order. That is the path that Krishna gives for everyone. We have even had people in this ashram, I remember, had said, if anyone says that they want to go to Vrindavan just to do bhajan, I'll never discourage them because that's the highest thing. Of course, ultimately such people are kicked away by Radha Gopinath who say these things because it is nonsense. You can study the Shastras for all your life, but if you don't understand the basic principle of humility and willingness to accept instructions from higher authorities, you'll make no true spiritual advancement, however many shastras you read or names you chant. Therefore, we have to understand that this is not attachment, this is attachment to our own egoistic conceptions. Attachment to our own unwillingness to undergo tribulation, difficulty, and hardships for the sake of service to Krishna and Guru. Arjuna, he demonstrated this. He was willing to fight. He was willing to endure heartbreaks, pain, and all sorts of disgraces on that battlefield because it was Krishna's desire. But you can't be attached to that service. You're just attached to who you're serving. Pariksit had everything in such a wonderful package. But when that Brahmin cursed him, he understood that Krishna is telling me that I have performed this service and now it's time to leave this world. So he left everything and he went to the bank of the Ganges. And there all the great saints and sages came to congratulate him for his detachment. He was willing to leave everything within a second's notice if it wasn't what Krishna wanted. He had children. A father is naturally attached to their children. But he was only attached to those children because it was service to Krishna to raise them. He also had a wife. He was attached to his wife only because it was a service to Krishna to take care of her. And he raised his children excellently, with great love and attention. And he took care of his wife with great respect, affection. He protected her. His family was blissful living with him. And everything else, his servants, his facilities, when it was no longer what Krishna wanted, within a second he left it, without even thinking twice. He became a sadhu. He went to the bank of the Ganges. Sarvadharaman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishami masacha. And there, all the great rishis, saints, sages, Narada, Vyas, Devala, Asita, they all were there. Bhardraj Muni, Parasara Muni, wherever they were, from whatever planet, in whatever universe, they all appeared. And they all started giving their suggestions to Maharaj Pariksit, who was inquiring, what is my duty now? You see, Maharaj Pariksit didn't think he had such a high relationship with Krishna. He didn't do anything on his own. He asked them, what is my duty now? If the great Vaishnavas would have told him, go back to Hastinapur and be king, as soon as he left it, as quick as he was able to leave it, he would have left that riverbank and returned to Hastinapur and been king. He never acted independent. He never had it such pride to decide what I'm supposed to do. But he inquired from the great Vaishnavas, what is my duty now? And so many people were giving so many various opinions, as Srila Prabhupada is explaining, but ultimately they all came to the conclusion that whatever Sukadeva Goswami says is final. Because he is in the proper parampara, disciplic succession. And what he says is truth. Maharaj Pariksit was a bona fide hearer because he was genuinely humble, submissive, and willing to do whatever his guru told him to do. That was his qualification. And Sukadeva Goswami was a proper bona fide spiritual master because he was coming in disciplic succession of previous acharyas. He had heard submissively from Vedavyas, and he was a living example of those teachings. So, Sukadeva Goswami took the elevated seat of the Vyasa-san, and Maharaj Pariksit, in the association of so many sages on the banks of the holy river Ganges, without taking food or drink, awaiting his own death, not with fear, but with faith, he inquired submissively from Sukadeva Goswami. This is very important to understand, that when a man is about to die, in such a short time as 7 days, it's our conditioned human nature to become fearful. How is it and why is it that Pariksit Maharaj had no fear? Because he had faith. Faith is the gift of the Supreme Lord that can destroy all fear and all suffering of this world. And what was Maharaja's Parikshit's faith? He had faith that the words of the great Vaishnavas would give him eternal life. He had faith that simply from hearing as a humble servant from Sukadeva Goswami, that he would be given eternal life at Krishna's lotus feet. That was his faith. The disciplic succession continues with all of its power and all of its glory. And when we hear from the great representatives of this great parampara of acharyas, the same gift is being offered to us as what was accepted by Maharaj Pariksit. There is absolutely no difference. One who is simply repeating the message without adulteration, without concoction, without the creative form of manufacturing our own idealistic ways of presenting Krishna consciousness. As it is, when we hear this message as it is from the disciplic succession, then we are given the same exact mercy that flowed through Sukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Pariksit. And if we just have faith in that mercy, if we have faith in those words, then we can become free from all fear. And we can transcend death itself. This was Maharaj Parikshit's glory. This was his detachment. He proved that his only attachment in life throughout was simply to serve the Vaishnavas and to serve the will of Krishna. Is there any questions?
Maharaj, as you said, that the main aim and goal of our life is not any profession or a business, but we have to have one thing, that how can I can serve the spiritual master, what is his instruction and how can follow it out. Now, we try to go on training ourselves in that basis, that I should not be attached to my profession or my business, but I should be more attached to the instruction. But sometimes that doubt or that fear is there in our mind, that okay, if he tells me to leave the business or if he tells me to leave my profession, I'll be able to leave it. I'll try my training myself. But sometimes that fear is there due to our material conditioning and due to our bodily structure. There are some things we are not able to do it due to our disease problems or some bodily structures problem. And there are some things, something which we are not able to do it. So that fear is to be there, that tomorrow if my spiritual master gives me one instruction to do this, my body is not able to accept it, or my problems which I have in my past, that thing I'll not be able to absorb it. Then how I'll be leaving my business or I'll be leaving my profession, but I'll not be able to satisfy him. So how to have that type of a conviction that although whatever I'll be getting it, I'll be able to do it, whatever happens it. Because that always that fear is there in our heart, that I might be leaving one thing, but I might not be able to accept it, whatever he's telling me. So how to take out that thing in our heart?
First of all, we must understand that we are not the doers. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karamani sar ahankara abhimutatma karatahamiti manyate. Due to our false ego, we think that we are the doers of our activities. But in truth, Krishna is doing everything through us, either directly, personally, through his disciplic succession of grace, or through material energy. So we may say that I can't do it.